The Pokemon I've always really liked ever since it came out back in Diamond Pearl. That I look at it looks like some kind of Spectre Reaper from a different dimension. It fits the part. It's very menacing, and I really have always appreciated its design. So now let's go and look at the stats. So there are two forms to Giratina. Its regular form is just going to be a ridiculous tank. I mean, why would there be a Pokemon that has 150 hit points with 120 on both defenses? That's a little absurd to me, but you know what? It's super powerful, so we might as well just go for that. And then there are a lot of other things behind Giratina that has 100 on attack and special attack, so we can take it offensively, and only 90 on the speed. So it's not going to be a heavy sweeper, but it's definitely going to be an anti-sweeper with that much hit points. That this Pokemon is just going to be too bulky to handle in a lot of situations, and that's how we're going to play around to it. Now, if we want to go to Giratina's origin form, it is going to be the opposite. That we still have 150 hit points because that's busted. So I mean, 150 hit points with 100 on both defenses is already some of the tankiest Pokemon we've ever seen, but now it has 120 in either offense. So that means you kind of get to be a mixed attacker, or you just go straight up, that you go for hardcore attack or hardcore special attack. And again, the 90 speed is going to take away from your heavy sweeping potential here, but you're just so bulky that you endure a hit, and then you're ready to just destroy faces back. Look at its typing, it's a Dragon Ghost type. Now, this is actually a really susceptible typing. For a tanky Pokemon, you don't want to be weak against 5 things, and a couple of those are pretty common, like Ice and Fairy, even Dark and Dragon to a degree. So there is quite a bit of balance in the stats, that it's weak to a couple things, resists a couple things, has some immunities, and the offensive typing, pretty decent. Not incredible, but still going to put out quite the hit. So hopping into Pokemon Showdown, we're going to see Giratina origin form is going to just be a huge bulk attacker, and we could go for speed, but we'll talk about that in a bit. So overall, I'm just thinking Adamant Nature for the physical side of Giratina, that you can go for quite a few different things right here. Shadow Force, very high base power, and you have to run the Grisius Orb, that way you get Giratina's origin form in a battle, so we're getting 20% more damage on Ghost and Dragon type moves. So Shadow Force, Stab, into high base power, into Grisius boost, and that's kind of insane. Also have Earthquake for coverage, Shadow Sneak. Shadow Sneak's going to get stabbed and a little bit of damage, so that with the 120 base power Adamant going to be a very solid hit. And then whatever other move you want here. You have Dragon Claw for the higher base power and just clearing out opponents pretty well, so that's also going to be boosted. Or we could also go for the Dragon Tail. Less damage, going to force you to move last, but most likely you're already going last against a sweeper. The idea is you're trying to force out the opponent and put them in an unfavorable situation. That if you already have Stealth Rocks or entry hazards on the field, or some of your opponent's Pokemon aren't as well equipped to deal with Giratina, use Dragon Tail, switch out their strong Pokemon, have one of the weaker Pokemon come in, and then you can pick it up with Shadow Force into Earthquake, or just get free turns to do things as they have to switch out, or they're just not as good to deal with you. So that's just going to be the outright offensive form of Giratina. Now you can tweak around the stats a bit. You can take some points off of the hit points and then go into special attack, but then that means we're not going to want to be an Adamant Nature, but that also puts us in a pretty awkward situation. With this 90 base speed, we're outspeeding a lot of tanks, even if they do have a decent amount of speed investment. But if we go Brave Nature, that means now we don't have to worry about losing our defenses and our tankiness. So if we go Brave, then that's going to work out. Or if we just kind of cut our losses for a specific stat. So with this, we're understanding, alright, we're going to be bulky, we're going to take that hit, and then we're throwing back a stronger hit. And this is where you put in something like Draco Meteor. Now you can have Draco Meteor instead of physical dragon coverage. That way you keep your Shadow Sneak for priority, which is still very strong. Or you just throw in the Draco Meteor, and now you use that move, just blow up your opponent's Pokemon on a switch-in, and then you go to transition to physical, because now you lose half your special attacks. So you don't want to be using Draco Meteor anymore, but you're still a very, very powerful physical attacker with that Shadow Force, the Earthquake, Dragon Claw, or if you're deciding to hold on to your Shadow Sneak, that could be another way. Instead of physical dragon coverage, that way you keep your Shadow Sneak for priority, which is still very strong, or you just throw in the Draco Meteor, and now you use that move, just blow up your opponent's Pokemon on a switch-in, and then you go to transition to physical, because now you lose half your special attacks. So you don't want to be using Draco Meteor anymore, but you're still a very, very powerful physical attacker with that Shadow Force, the Earthquake, Dragon Claw, or if you're deciding to hold on to your Shadow Sneak, that could be another way of just running it. And we're only taking 1 turn's worth of damage while we're 2-shotting the opponent back because of all of our high damage and boosting. So that's something very big to consider with Giratina. Also with the origin form, since it is a special attacker, we can just kind of focus on that. We can go Timid Nature, try to get the most speed possible. Potentially if you have a Sticky Web set up or something like that, maybe even Baton Passing Speed Boost into it. Or if you're just understanding, alright, I'm going to try to outspeed what I can and just go for ridiculous amounts of damage. that could be pretty rewarding, or you just stay as a tanky kind of setup Pokemon. In that case, we'll just go modest, and we just forget about speed, invest into hit points, maybe a bit into the defense, since we are using Calm Mind, and then we just go for broke. With this, we go Calm Mind on that first turn, and then we try to one-shot everything from there. 120 special attack with the Grisius Orb with Stab on Shadow Ball and Dragon Pulse is going to be absurd, and then we also have Earth Power damage. So Earth Power is going to be pretty good. We can run things like Aura Sphere, Dark Pulse, so we can get a really good amount of coverage out of this, and as well as just having very high amounts of damage. Calm Mind is going to be very free with how tanky you are, and then with your defensive bulk and whatnot, we're going to be incredibly balanced, and we can endure all sorts of hits, and then just start throwing one-shots back, potentially. So that's going to be a thing to consider with Giratina. Now, there is another thing to talk about. With this Pokemon, it is a legendary Pokemon with 680 base stat total, which means it's not going to be usable in most formats. So if you're playing with this format, other legendary Pokemon are allowed. So now, like, the whole chart, everything's just getting super skewed at this point. That against normal Pokemon, this is just going to be like an easy steamroll with this, because nothing's going to be able to damage you effectively. But compared to legendaries, they're going to have decent amounts of damage, and you might not always find the right hits. So there are going to be a lot of necessary damage calculations, and if you specialize in legendary battles, you probably have a little bit of an idea of what's going on here. If you don't specialize in legendaries battles, you just have to kind of learn it. There's not really too much that can be said about it. You just have to understand everything you're playing is going to be busted in some way, so you just have to try to be more busted. And that's why we have alternate form Giratina. I also had to show the shiny. As much as I love Giratina, the shiny form is also freaking awesome. So with this, what people like doing is running Rust Talk. Rust Talk is absolutely terrifying because as a physical wall, your opponent will not be able to do any damage to you. So you run like a super heavy special defense tank, maybe Calm Mind setup, maybe some kind of setup for itself, and then you run physical Giratina. The opponent has a physical Pokemon, they're not really going to do anything to you because, okay, set up Will-O-Wisp, that cuts their attack down. Sweet, then you have Rust Sleep Talk, and while you're sleep talking, you just roar them away. So taking a little bit of Will-O-Wisp damage, you roar them out. If you have injury hazards up, that's going to be pretty powerful. New Pokemon comes in, you might sleep talk into a Will-O-Wisp. If you're not even asleep, that's going to be powerful. And let's just look at it this way. 500 hit points, 372 defense, and then your opponent's attack is cut in half. They're just not going to be able to damage you, even with super effective hits, that they're going to have to be able to boost. So if they use like 2 Swords Dances to get over the Will-O-Wisp, that could be a bit of a problem, but then if they're setting up like that, you can just roar them away. So you rest, like you sleep talk the roar on the turn they Swords Dance. That's just free burn, free damage, and all sorts of free stuff. And then you just go into your special defense wall whenever they bring in something that threatens you. Or you can run Giratina a little bit mixed. That Giratina doesn't get access to Calm Mind, so you can kind of run it the same. You won't be as heavy on the defenses, because I was thinking you go with a Calm Nature in this way. So you set up Calm Mind, you throw out a Will-O-Wisp when necessary, and then you rest. Then you can go for Dragon Pulse. With Dragon Pulse, it used to be terrifying, but now with Fairy-type Pokemon, you can get walled out with immunities on this set. So also have a Pokemon that's going to be like a Steel-type, a heavy Fairy Killer Pokemon. Can be very powerful, so you just throw out the Will-O-Wisp, and you can try to outstall them that way, because Fairy types do threaten you, and you do have a decent amount of super effective hits. So be wary of that. That's just if you want the stab. If you don't want the stab, and you just want to hit everything consistently, Dark Pulse is good for that. So you can just find the damage where you need to, and hopefully turn that into something. So really, Calm Mind Will-O-Wisp, going to be a little more set up, but can get much more tankier. That now we're dealing it to where you're not taking any physical damage, and after 2 Calm Minds, you're not taking special damage, and then you just kind of sit in there with the rest. You know, rest will take away for a couple turns, you wake up Dark Pulse back into a rest, you have Will-O-Wisp options, and then you can maybe even switch out Giratina, have a Pokemon with Heal Bell, wake it up, and then you can refresh against like a different Pokemon setup, and just go for big damage. That, you know, eventually you're going to get to the point where Giratina is just going to become too tanky to kill. So if you're not a fan of Rest Talk, this idea works. You just want to become the ultimate wall in every situation, because 150 hit points with 120 in defenses. It's going to be very hard to take that down without any kind of boosting. So if you guys enjoyed this video, that's how you use Giratina. Really awesome Pokemon. I love everything about it. I hope you all have a nice day. Thank you for watching. Welcome back, Wolfpack! Welcome back, Wolfpack! Welcome back, Wolfpack. Verlis here, and this is how to use Dusclops. Dusclops has some pretty absurd stats, that while it has almost nothing for the hit points, it has really solid defenses and special defenses. Also, it's a not fully evolved Pokemon, which means that Eviolite is going to boost those defenses even further, which is terrifying to think about. Now, it really doesn't have much offensively, speed-wise, or anything else. So this is actually like the perfect view of a tank. If this Pokemon says, I don't need any offenses, I don't need no speed, just give me my defenses, let me not take damage ever, and we'll be good to go. Again, its typing, it's a pure Ghost-type Pokemon. We just saw this with Bayonet, and it's pretty much the same thing, that you only have to worry about Ghost Dark types, you don't have to worry about normal and fighting, but evolved defense and special defense are 1.5 times, which is already really ridiculous. So then I was thinking we max out the hit points because they're so low, and then we just split it up between defense and special defense, and then give it a special defense nature. Why, you may ask? Well, Will-O-Wisp. It's going to burn the target, which cuts their attack in half, and now we have a pretty special defensive bulk Pokemon, and now a Pokemon that's just not going to take anything from physical damage as well, and mostly you can kind of mess around with this how you please. That since Ghost and Dark are generally going to be more special based, or like more commonly encountered in special, you can really just put a higher care into your special defense, and then once you get that burn off, you're not worrying about taking too much damage from there anyway. Now this Dusclops is very reminiscent of the Battle Tower Dusclops. That pretty much it sits there, it uses Confuse Ray and Double Team until it has max evasion, you're hitting yourself. Its variant runs Toxic. I prefer Will-O-Wisp from a competitive aspect because it does have that attack drop, and then Rest. And by this point you can't do anything to them. That you're just going to Will-O-Wisp and then Rest, and now the opponent's going to get burned down over time. Like, this Pokemon is the epitome of stall. Very, very few things can 1 or even 2 hit KO this Pokemon, and if they're trying to set up, you know, you're getting set up as well with Double Team. If they hit themselves in confusion with that Will-O-Wisp burn, they're not going to last too long. Now, naturally, this can be taunted or stalled out, but if your opponent doesn't have any ways of handling it, it's just over for your opponent right there. Also, Dusclops works really well in Trick Room, that this can work out for singles or doubles, mostly doubles, because now you're setting up Trick Room for your ally. This Pokemon is not going to is very hard to one-hit KO on that first turn, so you're most likely getting that Trick Room set up. And now you have that speed priority, that by running a Sassy Nature, your speed is so low, you're probably going to be one of the first Pokemon to move that turn. Nightshade is going to do a set amount of damage, which is pretty nice. Then you also have Taunt and Will-O-Wisp. Burn your opponents, set up Taunt, and now in doubles, you either have to deal with this tanky threat that will never go away, or you also have to deal with the other Pokemon that's in Trick Room. A lot of people like running Mega Mawile, a lot of really slow, beefy, hard-hitting Pokemon in Trick Room, which means you have to pay attention to something, or you're just going to get completely destroyed by it. And that's just how Dusclops works. Also, a couple other moves. This isn't a moveset in itself, but you know, it does have Pain Split, which means you can anticipate if you're 2-hit, 3-hit KO, you know, you set up your Confuse Ray, you set up your Double Team, you set up any kind of thing that you want to set up, and then on that second or third hit, you know, you're thinking you might be really low on hit points, use Pain Split, cut your opponent's attack, or cut your opponent's hit points almost in half right there, or however much the difference is, and then Pain Split is going to give you a lot of health back. This is where having a really low hit points works in your favor. That since it takes the average, you're going to be getting a lot of health back, and they're going to be losing a lot of health from it. In Trick Room, Destiny Bond is very viable, that instead of Nightshade, Taunt, or Will-O-Wisp, or whatever, that they might not expect the speedy Destiny Bond coming in their face once you've set up a bit and you're at low health, which is also really nice. Then we have Haze and Snatch. Snatch is just going to be a nice little supportive steal, and then Haze is going to make it to where if you're not stat changing or you're not doing anything like that, it can work out really well to just shut down your opponent's setup. And it's not going to be good for the double team because then it's just eliminating yours, but in doubles, if you feel that a Pokemon's going to try to be setting up, it could be a nice little trick to have. Or in singles, if you just want to have this Pokemon that's anti-setup, you know, it can set up Haze, it can throw out a Taunt, and then it can really just kind of burn and confuse threats. From there, it can be a really nice Pokemon to force switches out on. Now, since we've been talking about Dusclops, what about Dusknoir? Well, Dusknoir doesn't do much, because when you have that Eviolite, it's just too tanky, and the stat boost really isn't there, that it gets slightly more defense, and slightly more hit points, and some more offense. So people will try to run it, you know, it's just going to be like bulk hit points, and then offensive stability, and just trying to get some really strong hits from there. That Trick Room works really nice, and then you can have coverage. That you can get all the elemental punches, so you have like Fire Punch, Ice Punch, Thunder Punch, get access to Earthquake, and Shadow Punch. Shadow Punch is really nice because the move does not check accuracy, so it technically works well against the Dusclops set to a degree. And that you can get all the